I'm going to continue with the Oneness versus the 1% by Vandana, Shiva and Kartikey, Shiva. The Foundation's agriculture and communications work is largely led by former corporate executives for agribusiness. Rob Horsch, who leads the agricultural research and development team, worked at Monsanto for 25 years prior to joining BMGF. Sam Dryden, head of agricultural development at the BMGF, previously worked for Monsanto Union Carbide, where he helped establish Dow AgroScience, one of the world's largest GM crop companies, and headed two of the world's largest GM seed companies. He was also CEO of Emergent Genetics, the US's third largest cottonseed company, which was sold to Monsanto in 2005. Dryden passed away in 2017. Miguel Vieira Pestana, Chief Communications Officer at the BMGF, previously served as Vice President Global Sustainability Strategy and External Advocacy at Unilever. Pestana has moved on from BMGF. Other corporations in which the Gates Foundation has invested as of 2014, cited in the Global Justice Now report, are the mining companies Barrick Gold, BHP Billiton, Freeport, McMoran, Glencore, Rio Tinto, Vale and Vedanta. In India, Vedanta have been trying to mine bauxite in the Nilgiri Hills of the Dongaria Gons. So far, the tribal people there have succeeded in protecting their sacred mountain. As per a report in The Guardian, the BMGF has investments in coal giants Anglo American, BHP Billiton, Glencore, Xstrata and Peabody Energy, and in the oil majors Shell, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, Total, Petrobras, BP and Andreco Petroleum. In June 2015, Gates has announced that he would invest $2 million in renewable energy projects. However, in October 2015, he said that fossil fuel divestment is a false solution, and at the same time accused environmentalists of making misleading claims that the price of solar power. The foundation invests in agribusiness companies Archer Daniels, Midlands Craft, Mondelez International, Nestle and Unilever, chemical and pharmaceutical corporations, which Gates' investments include BASF, Dow Chemicals, GlaxoSmithKline, Novartis, Pfizer, the beverage companies Coca-Cola, Diageo, PepsiCo and SABMiller also receive investments from BMGF. In 2014, Gates had $538 million worth of shares in Coca-Cola. In addition, the BMGF uses its grant to encourage local communities to partner with Coca-Cola in business affiliates. As of the end of 2014, the foundation had investments worth $852 million in the construction company Caterpillar, which has long been accused of complicity in human rights abuses in the Palestinian occupation territories. BAE Systems, and the UK's largest arm exporter, is another investee. The foundation held shares in McDonald's until December 2014 and holds shares at Arcos Dorados, Latin America's largest quick service chain and largest McDonald's franchise in the world, which operates the latter 2,602 restaurants. Philanthro-capitalism. The Gates model of philanthro-capitalism has little to do with charity and giving and more to do with profits, control and grabbing. It is in fact an economic model of investment and a political model of control, silence and erasing diversity, democracy and alternatives. New markets and new monopolies are carved out through dominance via aid. At the 64th World Health Assembly in Geneva on the 16th of May 2011, Gates admitted that the foundations fund research in vaccines and subsequently takes out patents on them. He said, in terms of IP, intellectual property, what we do is actually quite simple. We fund research and we actually ourselves or our partners create intellectual property so that anything that is invested with our foundation's money that goes to richer countries, we're actually getting a return on that money. Gates has given money to fight the Ebola epidemic in Africa and to the Centre of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, in Atlanta, and the National Institutes of Health, NIH, which has patents on the Ebola vaccine at the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany on the 8th of July 2017. Of all the diseases in the world, Ebola was singled out for attention, indicating just how it sets the development financing agenda, the Global Justice Now report warns. Gated development demonstrates that the trend to involve business in addressing poverty and inequality is central to the priorities and funding of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We argue that this is far from neutral charitable strategy, but instead an ideological commitment to promote neoliberalism, economic policies and corporate globalisation. Big business is directly benefiting, in particular in the fields of agriculture and health, as a result of the Foundation's activities, despite evidence to show that business solutions are not the most effective. Perhaps what is most striking about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is that despite its aggressive corporate strategy and extraordinary influence across governments, academics and media, there is an absence of critical voices. Global Justice Now is concerned with the Foundation's influence is so pervasive that many actors in the international development which would otherwise critique the policy and practice of the Foundation are unable to speak out independently as a result of its funding and patronage. Granted Developments further reports, a major problem with the focus on technology is that BMFG, along with other philanthropic foundations, is reshaping aid policy further away from prioritising rights and justice towards a technocratic, authoritarian development. For example, Bill Gates in his 2015 annual letter stated that the next 15 years will see major breakthroughs in poor countries, which will be driven by innovation in technology ranging from new vaccines and hard crops to much cheaper smartphones and tablets, and by innovations that help deliver those things to more people. One history, an illusion constructed by the 1%. Everything faded into mist. The past was erased. The erasure was forgotten. The lie became truth. George Orwell. The struggle of people against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. Milan Kundera. Engineering erasure is a vital element in the creation of the money machine and the delusion of democracy that helps maintain it. This includes the erasure of diverse knowledge, our diverse economies, our diverse democracies and our diverse histories. It simultaneously leads to the erasure of the potential of our diversities to coexist in mutual independence and cooperation, contributing to a shared prosperity and the common good. It is also an erasure of the violence of colonialisation, past and present. The violence is naturalised as progress, and the erasure presents at every stage of colonisation as creation. It erases the link between the wealth and the power of the colonisers and the poverty and marginalisation of the colonised. Development is part of this narrative based on Rostow's stages of growth, which naturalised the poverty created by colonisation into underdevelopment and offered further colonisation through externally controlled and externally driven development as the solution of this poverty. Rogue ventures among the most irresponsible experiment that Gates is pushing is that of geoengineering, which began as a military tool for weather modification and was part of geopolitical warfare. It is a deliberate modification of weather and climate to intervene in the Earth's climate system. Techniques include solar radiation management, SRM, as well as other Earth system interventions under the umbrella of carbon dioxide removal, CDR, or greenhouse gas removal, GGR. Gates and his billionaires are both financing geoengineering experiments and lobbying with governments to back these experiments in a global scale. As per a report in The Guardian, in 2009-10, the US government received requests for over $2 billion in grants for geoengineering research, but spent around $100 million. The report states that Professor David Keith, Harvard University, and Ken Calderia of Stanford University received over $4.6 million from Gates to run the Fund of Innovative Climate and Energy Research, FICER. It further adds that according to the statements of financial interest, Professor Keith receives an undisclosed sum from Bill Gates each year and is the president and majority owner of geoengineering company Carbon Engineering, incorporated in 2009, in which Gates and another private investor, Murray Edwards, have major stakes believed to be together worth over $10 million. Another Edwards company, The Guardian, elaborates the Canadian Natural Resources has plans to spend $25 billion to turn bitumen-bearing sand found in northern Alberta into barrels of crude oil. Professor Calderia says he receives $775,000 a year from Gates, holds a carbon capture patent, and works for Intellectual Ventures, a private geoengineering research company part owned by Gates and run by Nathan Myhrvold, former head of technology at Microsoft. As Diane Bronson of ETC Action Group on Erosion Technology and Concentration says in The Guardian, there are clear conflicts of interest between many of the people involved in the debate. What is really worrying is that the same small group on high-risk technologies that will geoengineer the planet is also trying to engineer the discussion around the international rules and regulations. We cannot put the fox in charge of the chicken coop. Clive Hamilton, Professor of Public Ethics at the Centre for Applied Philosophy and Public Ethics at Charles Smart University and author of Earthmasters, The Dawn of the Age of Climate Engineering, writes in his blog for The Guardian, "The eco-clique are lobbying for a huge injection of public funds into geoengineering research. They dominate virtually every inquiry into geoengineering. They are present in almost all of the expert deliberations. They have been the leading advisors to parliamentary and congressional inquiries, and their views will, in all likelihood, dominate the deliberations of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, as it grapples for the first time with the scientific and ethical tangle that is climate engineering." Bill Gates has directed at least $4.5 million of his own money towards the study of methods that could alter the stratosphere by reflecting solar energy and brightening ocean clouds. Intellectual Ventures are applied for patents on techniques to geoengineering the stratosphere, along with officials from that organisation. Gates applied for a patent in 2008 to sap hurricanes or their strength by mixing surface and deep ocean water. Gator Development reports a recent report by The Lancet. The University College London concluded that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. Instead of focusing on pollution and the anthropogenic factors driving climate change, the assumption is that the problem of climate change is that sun shines on the earth. All geoengineering solutions to climate change are simplistic and non-ecological and focus on blocking the sun, either by reflecting sunlight back through mirrors in the sky or creating artificial volcanoes or spraying aerosols, but the sun is not the problem. Fossil fuel and the fossil fuel-based industrial systems, including industrial agriculture, are the problem. The sun is essential, for without it there would be no photosynthesis, no life, no food. Climate change is not just global warming, to which the mechanical responses is global cooling by life-destroying geoengineering experiments. Climate change is a disruption of the Earth's processes through which she regulates the climate. The consequence of this disruption is climate chaos and extreme and unpredictable events. Geoengineering will only aggravate this disruption. In a paper delivered at the Geoengineering Conference on Ethics, Jane Long, Director at Large for the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories in the US, cautions we will need to protect ourselves from vested interests and to be sure that choices are not influenced by parties who might make significant amounts of money through a choice to modify climate, especially using proprietary intellectual property. When our age is referred to as the Anthropocene, it refers to the power of humans to disrupt the Earth's ecological processes, but it would be arrogant and irresponsible to claim that this power to destroy gives some privileged humans the right to commandeer the Earth's resources, processes and system in denial and creativity, self-organisation and diversity to living beings and living systems. Nature is more than a human construct or an object of human manipulation for short-term benefits. It is a creative process of the universe to be alive and to live in the ecocene. I refer to ecocene as both the ecological process of the earth and the biosphere that shapes, maintains and sustains life, and the increasing consciousness among humans that we are Earth citizens, part of the Earth community. It includes the awareness that the Earth has rights and that we have a duty to care for her, her creatures and her fellow humans, and it includes correcting the transcending the mistakes, false assumptions and the limitations of the one mechanical mind. I have consciously avoided calling our times the age of the Anthropocene because an anthropocentric worldwide has caused much of the ecological destruction of our times. To continue putting humans at the centre of consciousness is the perpetuate human hubris. Moreover, the anthropocentrism goes hand in hand with ethnocentrism and the paradigms that emerge in the West. With the rise of colonialism, industrialism and capitalism, the rule of the 1% is a hyper-anthropocentrism which does not just exclude the rights of all human beings, it also excludes most human beings themselves. The 2007 World Environment Day was dominated by the US President Donald Trump walking out of the Paris Agreement. What does Trump's arrogance imply for international obligations to protect the earth, for a future based on ecological justice, for sowing the seeds of earth democracy? Environmental laws at the national level were created in the 1970s to protect the earth from harm, and because we live on the earth, to protect people from harm. In 1992, at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, the international community adopted two major ecological principles, the precautionary principle and the polluter pays principle, and signed two legally binding agreements, the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. Both treaties were shaped by emerging ecological sciences and the deepening ecology movement. One was a scientific response to the ecological pollution due to fossil fuels. The second was a scientific response to the genetic pollution caused by GMOs and the erosion of biodiversity due to the spread of industrial chemical monocultures. 3 years ago, Rio, the UN Leipzig Conference on Plant Genetic Resources assessed that 75% of biodiversity had disappeared because of the green revolution and the industrial farming. Interdisciplinary science and democratic movements created the momentum for international environmental law. Science and democracy continues to be the forces challenging the terrible threat to the earth used by corporate greed. In the matter of the climate change, the key issue is reducing emissions and developing strategies for adoption. In the matter of biodiversity conversation, the key issue for biosafety and the adoption and promotion of practices that conserve biodiversity. A project which illustrates both the shallowness of Gates' ideas and his will to control nature and society, or have a machine do it for him, is the Big History Project, in which he has reportedly contributed $10 million. The project is inspired by videos produced by Australian Professor David Christian, which Gates saw while exercising on his treadmill. Christian's videos are not about history, they are about displacing people's histories to create linear technocratic visions for a society based on genetic determinism. There are no people in Christian's rendering of history, no culture, no colonisation, no corporations, no billionaires running an economy for the 1%. Big history is nothing more than a mechanism, reductionism, technocratic narrative of power and control. It is a story to create a future. The 1%, by the 1%, for the 1%. It is the rewriting of history for big money, as Catherine Edwards writes in her article, Why the Big History Project is Funded by Bill Gates. The most alarming aspect of this is not the substance of what Gates and Christian are proposing. It is the fact that someone has no background in history or in education can happen to chance upon an idea one morning while on his treadmill, and before long the education of thousands of children is disrupted to align with his latest fad, all because of the enormous economic power he wields. In the UK, state education is rapidly following the US model, becoming ever more commercialised and divorced from democratic accountability. Local authority schools are being offered bribes by brokers to become academics, and the Department of Education has refused to rule out for-profit state schools. We are recently endured an educational secretary who drafted the history curriculum on a whim. Perhaps next time it will be an unelected billionaire. Bill's has an extremely limited vocabulary of innovation, technology and investment. It reveals how his imagination is shaped by the tools of power and control, money and technology. Multiple voices and messages are at the heart of freedom and democracy. When people are free, they have a voice. When societies are democratic, their voices are heard. When societies become undemocratic, voices are suppressed and silenced. Big money is threatening democracy by silencing people's diverse voices, controlling and manipulating the message, the media, and consequently the public mind. One history is also the rewriting of history, of the fabrication of reality, and silencing the real voices of real people to create an echo chamber for a genetically engineered, digitally driven narrative. So we'll leave it there for now.